fact of, but if there is ever any opportunity to have shared resources and earn income through it, that would be what they're trying to promote with these recommendations. So and that would be the same as 5. So 6 is training division plus other divisions planned at the beginning of the year. We set forward that with my budget, performance-based budget with prevention. We set out a plan, what I wanted accomplished, set our goals for prevention. We're kind of there, but this has been an odd year for complaints. We've received over 220 prevention complaints so far this year that we have to follow up, plus trying to do our budget plan that I laid out. So suppression side, we're on track. We put out in the first of the year, we actually started in about October of 16 with this, or sorry, 17, because that's when the fire college's calendar comes out and it gives us an opportunity to book training and also then try and book ourselves any in-house courses. So actually, I'm pretty proud of that one with the deputies taking this to heart. He's worked with all the groups. The volunteer group understands where they're going for the year, so it's been a real success for us, that one. Number 7, so additional administrative staff support. We've had numerous talks at department heads over staffing needs, wants, and I think everybody comes to the table, but I think we can accomplish this with staff within the municipality, and it says in the report that to work other options to investigate opportunity, usually utilizing administrative support from other town departments, and that's more in our peak time or when my administrative assistant goes on holidays. There's a lot of work with the new procurement plan and PO issuing and credit card retrofit, taking care of the credit card purchases. But I think Dean had mentioned that there's always the opportunity he might have some staff that aren't obtaining their full hours of commitment, so we could share staff around, and then it's a great redundancy for our department to have other people understand and be able to step in and do some of the work. Our biggest our hurdle is Firehouse, and that's our reporting system that we can track and control everything with. And to have something, I don't even understand it, and it's been 3 years in the making, so, and we keep evolving it. So just to have somebody understand that, but I think we can accomplish this one with internal staff, or at least I hope we can. So, number 8, full-time training position. So it said a short-term to mid-term. I kind of put this as a little bit more of a higher importance now. In 2019, the province of Ontario has mandated through new Ontario regulation that we certify all firefighters to level 1 and 2 of NFPA standards, and anybody else who has any other, and a fire officer to fire officer 1 and 2, and then a senior officer to fire officer 3, 4. We've accomplished all the certification requirements that's required right now, but it's the maintenance program afterward that's going to be difficult for us. My officers aren't getting the training because they're trying to deliver training and to keep up to these standards. So at some point, I would think I'll be coming back to a new council at some point when I deem it necessary and ask for a full-time training officer within my department. So now that person, it just wouldn't be, training would be the primary goal, but it could be used as a firefighter at a scene when on duty or off duty, and as an incident safety officer also. So I'm not trying to do any budget plugs or begs or wants here, but it's just something that we should have a heads up in the future. So number 9 is, I could get into this really heavy, but there's 2 standards out with NFPA, and it's NFPA 1720, 15 staff in 9 minutes, 10 staff in 10 minutes, and then there's 1710 rules, 4-minute drive for full-time crews. So it's a standard they lay out for me to base the level of service we're offering to the municipality. And what the recommendation here is that I create, with both 9 and 10, is that I create and update council on our levels of service annually, and this would be with performance-based. The consultant laid out a great map and taught us how to do calls and response times and locations, and it shows if your station's in the right place, if we're having staff come back at the right time. So That's just something annually I'll be updating council. I'll take it to committee first and then council get the updates annually. And I could do it probably biannually if that was the want of council, but we'll see how the first one goes and if I don't mess it up too bad. But we're in pretty good shape when it comes to that at this point, so. So that was monitoring and paging firefighters and response time to the fire hall. This right now what we have is if it's minor incidents where we need the station covered because the pump will be tied up or at a scene because we maybe have a big grass fire, but we haven't had to institute a full staff recall. That this is what this pertains to. And right now I think what we pulled out of Firehouse is that we are close to meeting a 5-minute response time back to the station, which I think is a great level of service the municipality's getting with our full-time firefighters. The commitment to that plus our volunteer corps that we have in place. Just to go back a little bit with, I'm not talking about our volunteer corps. When we hired or replaced a bunch of our volunteers, we hired to the new standard and we had over 32 applicants. So there's lots of people in the municipality to take advantage of. So it was a pleasure to know that we don't have to worry about trying to bring those people up to the training level. They're there, we just have to maintain it. And that's for our volunteer corps too. So I think we're 11. So this talks about the possibility of opening a second fire station in the future, and if so, how do you staff it? Again, that would be part of that 1710, 1720 and our level of service if we felt that we're growing too fast or not too fast. If growth gets to the point where we believe that we need another station for response because response times were getting above the 10-minute mark, I'll say, then that's something I'd come back and recommend. And what they're saying in here to take a less burden if that's a decision in the future, and this is 7 to 10 year out prediction for them, is that you would do it in the best way would be consider increment hiring, where we do have the ability to house 10 firefighters at the station. So you don't have to go out. I wouldn't come in and say, I want 12 firefighters or I want 6 firefighters. We could do it in increments to make it less of a cost at the time if that's a decision of council. And then the last one was a simple one. As you know, we've done is we've contracted or signed with Firemark. So far, I believe we have around 7 billable offenses. Not great money, but it is creating some revenue, covering staff costs for overtime. And I haven't had any complaints yet from anybody that we've billed, so I don't think that's a bad thing. And everybody who does get billed does get notified on this by Firemark that that's part of their contract. So, and was there anything, I couldn't find any other places for revenue. I hate taking advantages of somebody's bad time, but it seems like everything we have in place with fees and services covers any of our expenses there, plus the Firemark billing. So seems been working out so far, and administratively wise, it isn't as difficult as I thought it was to do this Firemark program. So
that's it.
Any questions?
Thank you very much, Chief. It was pretty self-explanatory, and you've further explained what is there in the presentation. And
through you, Your Worship, I believe that Krista's going to put out the link to the full plan so everybody can have a full look at all of it. So it did cover, they looked at our equipment replacement, which they know we have a great capital asset management plan, how we're looking after things. So a lot of stuff was found in-house and in order, so that was a really compliment to the department and to the town. So,
thank you. Questions, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Worship. As part of the study, did they do an analysis of our staff complement versus population in our municipality, in same size municipality and within the county and so on, just some comparators?
through you, Your Worship, the Councillor Doherty, no, that wasn't part of it. What they look at is, I always talk of NFPA, and it's National Fire Protection Association. They have standards, and they look for every 1,000 people, how many firefighters you should have, or every 500 people. So we fall within the parameters of that to the size of our municipality at now with the growth level we're at now. So, and to say where we are like Innisfil went from 12 firefighters to 30 firefighters in the last 2 years with their growth. So it just shows that what certain developments dictate certain things, where we did our growth in 9 and 10, we seem to be holding very well to the population, or to the growth within the municipality, and we seem to be at a decent level now. And that would also reflect in our response times. If we didn't have the right firefighters, our response times would be higher. But if we had lower firefighters, or too many firefighters, you would see it curve the other way, that, well, how can you be 2 or 3 minutes response time, and it would show it that way. So when I present the level of service in our response time, that kind of shows how we're doing with our staffing levels also.
Right, yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm thinking back to the most recent, and I admit that they were from a couple of years ago, but the size of the fire service in the town of Wasaga Beach, town of the Blue Mountains versus town of Collingwood. And I just recall at the time that town of Collingwood, town of Wasaga Beach were about the same size, but they had, I believe, 8 fewer firefighters than we did.
So, through your worships, town of Wasaga Beach is up staff since then, and they're at 23. So 20 suppression firefighters with a training officer that works day shifts but is classified as a firefighter also. They don't have any prevention staff, but we have industry, multiple business that dictates it. I don't know why they don't. Town of Blue Mountains just went full-time, but they're a day shift, and I can't tell you why or how it dictates or what happens there. So I will be bringing back an agreement soon that we're just reviewing with. It'll be a fire service agreement with them that we will respond out there if they need help. So if I had to comment, would I say they need firefighters? My personal opinion, yeah, they're really putting themselves at jeopardy with the size of the village and stuff. But I understand from their chief the reason why is then how do you tell the farmers on the hill they have to pay for something that they'd never use, is what you hear. So
I've got here,
Thank you.
Strategic Initiative Standing Committee receive and refer the following recommendation at the next meeting of council. The council received the fire services master plan as presented and refer future expenditures to budget deliberations, mover and seconder. Councillor Fryer, Councillor Ecclestone, any further questions? I'll call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, Chief. 5-year capital plan. Ms. Leonard, you're up.
Thank you, Worship. This is a very high level recap of what is in the plan that we've been working on. Jen, next one. Just to remind everybody, the purpose of the plan is that capital budgeting allows a municipality to plan for future operating budget expenditures, manage debt repayment levels, and determine the future reserve fund requirements. And that an approved 5-year capital plan is a key performance indicator under the goal of accountable local government in the community-based strategic plan. I put a disclaimer on the plan itself just to ensure that everyone understood the only items within this plan that council has approved are the 2018 budget items. So the disclaimer does read that other than the identified 2018 budget items, council has not approved or endorsed any of the specific items in the plan. The document is to be used as a reference tool only and represents a consolidation of the views of various staff members responsible for maintaining assets and services. This capital plan that we've got includes 2019, which will become the basis for what we're going to go ahead with in the 2019 budget planning. So we've got a good step up on that process already. So the highlights of the plan over the next 5 years, 18 to 22, we're expecting capital investment of $189.3 million. The largest areas of that investment is the water department at $52.04 million, or 27.6% of the total expenditures, and the wastewater at $47.7 million, or 25.2%. The cost of major upgrades and expansion to the treatment facilities are the drivers for those expenditure levels. The 2018 budget approved $27.1 million of the $189.3, and subsequent to the adoption of the budget on March the 12th, I believe it was, we've had few staff reports come back to council for approval of another $1 million in capital projects. Those capital projects have all been funded either through reserves or donations or grant funding that has come through, so it's not affected our tax rates at the bottom. In terms of the capital budgets by department, corporate management has 5%. Public works, I'm going backwards, counterclockwise this time, just wanted to see if you're all good. Public works is 17%. Transit will be only about 1%. Parks and rec will be 20%. The airport is at 2%, and we have included the airport calculations in here simply because we when the plan was being created, and we still don't actually have a resolution as to what or where the airport, how, if there will be any ownership or whatever, so we've left it in here. Wastewater will take 25% of the overall, and water will take 28%, and then there were a few other smaller items. The other ones, there were building department wanted some vehicle updates, the IT amounts, and those types of things. In terms of the financing sources, there's I need to mention this first. We do have a very large component of unfunded projects, and specifically we have $4 million for the airport, $8 million for the terminals, and $15.4 million for the waterfront master plan projects. We will be investigating innovative funding approaches such as public-private partnerships to minimize the effect on the taxpayer. We will continue to seek out any potential granting opportunities to fund those. We would exhaust all of that before we would recommend a debenture at this time. And again, some of those projects will lend themselves to the innovative funding, like the public-private partnerships, a little easier, and others will be probably more challenging. We should, you know, if the waterfront master plan would be probably a good example of one that would be public-private partnership potential within that one. In terms of external funding sources, they do account for 60% of the projected, I believe it is 160 that's left out to be unfunded. Development charges would be $66.4 million. Other municipalities would be $30 million, and that's in regard to the water treatment plant expansion there. And we have estimated that grants would be about $15.6 million. By 2022, the water and wastewater development charge reserve funds we're projecting will be overdrawn by $2.6 million for water and $10.6 million for wastewater. But just a little note there that the projected DC collections have been based on the 2014 background study, and updates for the DC and the water and wastewater rate studies will be conducted in 2019. And when we provide the capital plan to the consultants, they will take into account any type of deficiencies or negative balances in the funds when they're calculating the new charges on a go-forward basis. internal funding sources. Primary source is reserves and reserve funds. The plan will use 4.3 million from reserves and 41.8 million from reserve funds. By 2022, net capital reserves will be reduced by $395,000 and capital reserve funds will be reduced by 10.7 million. In terms of the capital reserves, we do have our surplus management policy, which allows us to maintain specifically the capital contingency reserve and the operating reserve and general reserve at specific amounts. So the one that will be reduced there is the public works equipment reserve, but that's a timing issue there. The capital reserve funds overall, the life cycle, the 10% non-DC, they're all projected to be $3.1 million under the target balances that we did establish in the reserve and reserve fund policy in 2017. Janet? So having gone through this exercise, it did result in two main recommendations. The initial asset management plan that council adopted in 2014 determined that there would be required a 3.6% increase in the town's tax levy per year for the years 2015 to 2022. And that would be just to be used to fund tax-supported capital reserves. If we take a look at the recommended transfer for 2018, it should be $4 million, and we are providing we have a provision of 1.65 million in the budget. In the past, we have relied on the surpluses to top up any of the transfers that we would need to the life cycle replacement. And that's really not going to be sustainable in the long run. So we would recommend that council consider an annual increase of 1%, which is approximately 309,000, depends on the assessments, in the town's tax levy per year dedicated to funding the capital reserves. And the town did commission a waterfront master plan process in 2016 and 2017 that produced a $50 million 15-year vision that meets the needs of the town's current residents, rejuvenates public spaces, and further enhances public access to the water and shoreline. Phase 1 is estimated to be completed in 2017 to 2022, and it has been included in the 5-year capital plan with an estimate of $22.3 million. And at this point in time, $15.4 million remains unfunded. Again, if all avenues of innovative funding have been exhausted, staff would recommend that council consider establishing a separate 1% waterfront master plan levy to provide funding, a funding source for this project. Next steps. We need to develop a strategic asset management policy in accordance with the provisions of the Ontario Regulation 588-17, and that needs to be in place by July 1st, 2019. We, in part, along with that, we need to review and revise, if necessary, the town's tangible capital asset policy. We will be extending the capital plan to cover a 10-year period, and that will coincide with the 2019 DC background study and the water and wastewater rate study, because they'll both look at periods of, I think 23 years seems to be the water horizon, and 20 for a lot of the other items. We will be working on operationalizing the impact of the capital projects. Capital projects can impose significant consequences, positive or negative, on the operating budget, and we should be including them in the capital decision-making process. So we'll be working on a method to make sure that we do capture all of the incremental costs that a growth portion of pump for whatever would require, and make sure that we do capture that in the operations. And then we will continue with the condition assessments on core municipal infrastructure in order to update the asset management plan and be compliant with the regulation again by July 1st, 2021. At that point in time, every municipality shall prepare an asset management plan in respect to the core municipal infrastructure, and the core being the water, wastewater, stormwater, roads, the basically the heavy hard services. And in respect of all its other infrastructure assets, we will continue to have that done by July 1st of 2023. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a quick synopsis of what is contained in the capital forecast plan.
Thank you, Ms. Leonard. I'm going to have the staff report on the floor that the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee received and refer the following recommendation to the next meeting of council. That council approve the 5-year capital plan and the recommendations contained therein be referred to the 2019 budget deliberations for further consideration. Mover, seconder. Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Doherty, questions? Councillor Ecclestone.
Marjorie, regarding our overall debt, I realize we have a series of debentures that are coming due at various dates, and I imagine most of them are fixed or locked. What's the maximum that we can pay down debt when we receive our 12 to 13 million from EPCOR, assuming it's in the fall? In 2018 and 2019, I guess I would ask.
Through your worship, we are actually paying off $3 million in principal every year, and right now, excuse me, at this point, all of the ventures that we do have remaining are fixed terms. We have a very large portion coming due in 2021 will be their last payments, and the next one I believe is 2024, and the final ones that we have will be 2028. So over the next 10 years, we will have all of those other debentures paid off. To prepay the balances or to buy them out, there's a fair penalty on.
And I would imagine most of them are in the 2 or 3% range from way back, right?
Through you, Your Worship, the 2024 debenture is at 5.67. Money was very high back then, and the 2028 debenture, I believe, is at it's roughly around that same dollar level. They were 20-year debentures when we took them out, whereas the ones that are coming due in 2021, money was very cheap back then in 10 and 11, and we took advantage of paying them off in the 10-year amount if we could.
Thank you.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to confirm, this plan does not take into consideration any potential revenue that the town may come on based on sale of any of our assets. Is that correct?
Through you, Your Worship, no, we have not considered any of that. Those, my understanding is that we will be having public consultation on those proceeds.
Good. Next question. I was of the view that our water and wastewater charges were sufficient to cover the ultimate cost of replacement of those two facilities when the time came.
Mr. McDonald.
That is correct. I think the only component that Treasurer Leonard talked about was development charges, and the issues with development charges is you need to do the work before the people show up, and so there's always a deficit there. In our development charge plan, we'll look at that and include interest charges that will have to be added to the development charges.
Okay, so in effect, those deficits that we'd be running by 2022 aren't real deficits, it's just our investment in new infrastructure before we get it back. Is that what you're...
Through you, Your Worship, yes, that's the way. It's a timing difference totally. We have to spend it and then collect it, and the collection is based on the build out.
Okay. And then
Go ahead.
the water treatment facility expansion, the cost of that, is that taking into account new Tecumseh? contribution?
Through you, your worship, the total cost we're estimating that is, now you, the total cost, when I mentioned it was 52.04 million for water infrastructure, then that was the gross cost. It didn't include the 30 that we'll be getting from New Tech, bringing that down to 22, so. I talked about expenditures on one side and revenues on the other.
Thank you.
Councillor Fryer.
Thank you, Mayor Cooper, and through you to the treasurer, I appreciate the writer on the document because that gives me some comfort to a degree because it is a very robust document, and as you say, it's taking staff input and putting recommendations down, but you're not looking at council to endorse, which we'd have a hard time doing because it does put impact onto future councils. Along with the fact that through the unfunded side of things, you're not looking at the projects that may be divestitures that may bring in some funds, but we also have a possible pending commitment if we decide to with the hospital, so that's not noted either. So there's quite a few other major factors there that are going to have impacts. You did speak briefly and talked about other solutions, PPPs, private partnerships as possibilities, and you're looking at any of the items that can be moved to a user pay philosophy, if it's possible.
Ms. Leonard.
Through you, your worship, totally, that would also be a solution for some of them.
Yeah, I noticed in the IT report on the work plan, it was talking about stormwater building possibly out at the end of 2019. That's just there as a projection, as a possibility. A question I had, if I could, Mayor Cooper, from the report, there was reference to the outstanding amounts for front-end loading agreements, and it talked about water 4 million. That is now the internal debt portion, isn't it? We no longer have anything water front-end loaded, or am I misunderstanding there? It was on page 17, Marge, the reference to the components that were from front-end loading.
Through you, your worship, we do still have some items that are on front-end agreements. We have the old Mayor Mills amount that is outstanding of $301,000 or $300,000 roughly there. We're going to be needing some, we're going to be doing the Stewart Road Reservoir based on a front-ending agreement. We still have some credits outstanding as well to Lotco, Mountain Croft, Grandview, what it's Mountain Croft subdivision there. And I think those are they might be up around the 500,000.
So in the internal debt too, that's the whole component there, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it comes out there, yeah.
Okay.
If I could, Mayor Cooper, as I said, I'm comforted by the rider because I would be wanting an awful lot more discussion if we were talking about following through on recommendations about tax increases. Because we've talked before about, I do believe cost allocation needs to be taken care of before we look to that. So I'll leave it at that and support it going forward to council.
Thank you, Councillor Fryer. Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Marjorie. Marjorie, if I may suggest that I think you were looking at $4 or $4.5 million expenditure over the next few years at the airport. Can I suggest that you look at those numbers from Pierre, because his request initially was for a wish list, which I believe was used in a staff report, which doesn't reflect actuals over the next few years, so perhaps that will come down substantially. It's worth checking.
Ms. Leonard.
Through you, Your Worship, yes, we when we redo this for 2019, we will come back through on it. It's 2018 is fixed, yep. And 2019 from this plan will be our starting point, so we will have it reviewed by the time we get to the final budget.
Thank you.
Okay. On that note then, I will call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next we have accountability and transparency Part 2, and I believe that's Miss Almas.
Yes, through your worship, to the committee. I was gonna start off saying that we've saved the best departmental reports to the end of the meeting. However, this agenda's had very important, significant reports, plus this accountability and transparency policy truly is a collaboration between all departments and really is one of our guiding principles that we all truly strive to achieve. So this report, we've summed it down for the PowerPoint purposes to 10 slides. So what I'll do first is just do a review of the background. So in 2013, Council did approve an accountability and transparency policy. This policy is a mandated policy through previous amendments to the Municipal Act. And the purpose of the policy is to provide guidance on how the town ensures municipal matters are approached in an accountable and transparent manner. So the definition of accountability is the principle that the municipality is obligated to demonstrate and take responsibility for its actions, decisions, and policies, and that it is answerable to the public at large. The definition of transparency is the principle that the municipality will conduct its business in an accessible, clear, and visible manner, and that its activities are open to examination by its stakeholders. So in 2017, based on actually a notice of motion from our deputy mayor and approved by council has requested staff to explore, this is all departments, opportunities to provide additional enhancements for accountability and transparency. So within that motion included a number of items which we're touching on the second part this afternoon, and we'll do a brief recap of the items that were in the part 1. So again, December 2017, council reviewed those items in those first round of enhancements, and that was also supplemented by changes as required through Bill 68. So part 1 enhancements included the appointment of an integrity commissioner. So again, that's our joint integrity commissioner with the County of Simcoe participating municipalities. Council authorized the alternate county council member policy, electronic participation for board and committees policy, requirement for written statement of municipal conflict of interest declarations. And again, this was something above and beyond the requirements on Bill 68, as this is mandated by the province to be implemented in March of 2019, and this is something that we're doing right now. This goes together with a registry, so right now we maintain a list of all the written disclosures on our website. And again, Bill 68, the requirement for a resolution on how closed meeting investigation reports will be addressed, and amend the in-camera closed meeting provisions, because there was an additional 4 items that were included within that bill. So the next section is where I'll review some of the additional policies that have been implemented since 2013. And this council has been extremely busy and proactive on a number of issues, and I'll even identify some more that were basically summarized in the reports here today as we go through these slides. So again, live streaming of all council and standing committees now occurs. The corporate resources and election campaign activities policies have been adopted. We have a corporate communications policy. We have enhanced community outreach and communications through meeting portal, our e-newsletters, our increased social media and media releases. Our council highlights, and these again are just to name a few. The implementation of a number of our financial policies to assist with long-term financial stability and reporting. So these practices include budget principles. It also refers to policies. Even the retention of our procurement officer was a decision of this council in 2015. We've implemented our new purchasing bylaw. We've used purchase orders. We have a new whole system in place for the RFP processes. We've implemented a donation policy, and within the various departments, we have identified performance management and measurement systems, and that's from our human resources areas right through to our environmental services and our financial information return reporting, as well as our internal departmental business plan measurement systems that we incorporate within our annual budget processes. So the recommendations that are contained within this report start with recorded votes. So this was a request to investigate our procedures and practical ways to enhance accountability and transparency. So items that we had looked at were the idea of undertaking recorded votes for all voting practices. So currently, we follow our procedural bylaw, and in the absence of the procedural bylaw, we follow Robert's Rules of Order. This is, they provide the provision on how to address recorded vote practices, and then each municipality that adopts a similar protocol to the parliamentary procedures can do our own enhancements. So for example, rather than doing a roll call, we ask for all members to stand and rise, whether they're opposed or in support of a motion. We have spent significant time working actually with our meeting management solution that we're using through iCompass right now, and they have been very supportive. They are a very proactive organization, and we met with them in the month of June to go over different ways that this council can achieve some enhancement without compromising meeting management and meeting efficiency. And what has been suggested, and we think will work actually, I think to the public very appropriately, it will show patterns for attendance as well as voting practices. So what we're recommending is that all significant items will be recorded. So basically, whether we do it through your tablets, so all members of council will have a tablet, and when a vote is called, you would raise your hand, and you'd also identify either on a tablet or there is microphone enhancements that we can do as well, which we are working with IT to undertake what the costing with that would be as well, that you could actually vote by hitting your microphone. So if there is a significant item that you want to have a recorded vote documented actually within the minutes, then a recorded vote would still be requested by a member of council. So right now, we are suggesting this be implemented through the 2018, the commencement of the 2018 to 22 council term. And in case that there is any discrepancy for the official minute records, they will prevail with the appropriate decision that council has recommended. The in-camera procedures. The investigation into, I think we're one ahead. That's okay. So in-camera procedures, the investigation of audio and video recording of our in-camera meetings was a significant topic of discussion at our clerks and treasurers forum. And based on advice and best practices, we're recommending continuing as status quo. The main reason is to protect the municipality, reduce any potential risk or liability is the reasons why we actually go in camera, and to review matters of confidentiality such as personnel matters about identifiable individuals, or review advice that is determined confidential that we receive from our solicitor. Regardless, what's important for the public to realize is that council is not able to make any decision in camera that pertains to a matter that's going to advance the business of the municipality. The only items that can be discussed and directed in camera is direction to staff or an item such as a procedural matter. So ensuring that if there's point of orders need to be called, recording and approving of in-camera minutes and that sort of item is the only items that can be discussed. What we're recommending in this section is a revised motion template for moving in camera. We don't believe that the general public are aware that there is a true vetting process for all in-camera matters. In-camera matters are not just thrown on an agenda without strategic placement because again, the in-camera items that you go in, that you can have those conversations for are only discretionary. So staff try as much as possible to ensure that everything is vetted publicly and it's only very strict items that can be discussed in camera. And again, this process, what we're recommending is that we revise the motion template for moving in camera to include an additional statement confirming that the matter has been discussed in a closed session, that's going to be discussed in a closed session has been appropriately vetted and meet the requirement of the Municipal Act. And this is something too that I have vetted with our municipal solicitor. He says again that obviously there's no legal reason to do this, however, we would be in the forefront for adopting such a practice. The next items are looking at lobbyist registries. So we originally looked at the implementation of a lobbyist registry in 2008. At that time, it was not requested to move forward. It was a very new mechanism that the ministry had put forward to municipalities. It was only mandated for use by the City of Toronto. However, this is something that varies in complexity, so it can be undertaken through in-house resources, or you can retain external services for that. For example, there's various municipalities that are using their integrity commissioner to provide the services as well. However, there is more administrative oversight that's needed for a lobbyist registry. So this is something, in speaking with CAO Min, that during the organizational realignment review, that this is something that we may be able to provide in-house, and again, depending on the complexity that we look at. The enhanced community outreach and engagement component. So currently we're undertaking a broader corporate consideration of both community outreach and engagement, and this is something that we brought forward during the 2019 budget deliberations. We've also talked about mechanisms to provide greater outreach within the community and not always making our stakeholders come to us, and actually more departmental and municipal business actually going out into various organizations and presentations happening out there. And our department heads and CAO have been quite active in undertaking those initiatives already. As you are aware, within the budget of 2018, we're undertaking the process of developing the new website. So again, where you see this as another enhanced community outreach opportunity, and as well as looking at a mobile app solution. And again, this will ensure that notifications are actually pushed out to the public for various mechanisms or various services or emergencies or matters that are of interest to specific individuals. They can request how they'd like and what notifications they want pushed directly to them. So that's something that we're exploring, and I'm hoping that we'll have that in place before the end of the year. So based on all of these recommendations and everything that has been updated and enhanced since 2013, we are recommending the accountability and transparency policy be updated. So based on the committee's direction today, what we're going to be looking at is bringing forward this report together with the updated policies that council confirms today. There is enhance accountability mechanisms and identify gaps that we have also determined. So one of them is an in-house legal counsel. So again, in discussions with CAO Min, there's always a balancing act that has to be considered when determining the appropriateness of utilizing legal counsel versus the cost of retaining that advice. Staff, though, regardless, utilize the general principle to reduce any risk or liability on a municipality. However, gaps and difficulties arise when you don't know what you don't know. So this is something that I believe will be reviewed within the organizational review and can come back for further discussion within that 2019 budget deliberation. Same with the other two mechanisms. These two mechanisms are actually provided directly within the Municipal Act, and again are discretionary functions. One of them is a municipal ombudsman. So a municipal ombudsman reports to council, and their function is to investigate in an independent manner any decision or recommendation made or act done or omitted in the course of administration of the municipality, its local boards, and such municipally controlled corporations as the municipality may specify, and affecting any person or body of persons in his, her, or its personal capacity. In addition to the Ombudsman is the Municipal Auditor General role, and the Auditor General reports to Council and is responsible for assisting the Council in holding itself accountable and its administrators accountable for the quality of stewardship over public funds and for the achievement of value for money in municipal operations. So right now, the difficulty in the review of this is there's not very many municipalities that provide these services. So in 2005 is when the municipal act was advised to permit the ombudsman position. So since that time, the province has provided oversight to the provincial ombudsman's office for municipal governments as well as universities, schools and hospitals. So that's why we don't see very many municipalities utilizing that mechanism that's provided in the act. However, there's more municipalities starting to use the municipal auditor function. So that is something that right now, in reviewing with actually our municipal advisor through the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, they've confirmed that these 5 municipalities that have been indicated in the report, so Sudbury, Ottawa, Toronto, Windsor and Vaughan, have all implemented similar systems. So again, that's something similar that will have to be explored through a strategic review and cost benefit analysis process, as the town of Collingwood is obviously not a city, we're a smaller municipality, and we have to undertake a review a little bit more closely in alignment with the budget deliberations. And basically, that's the gist of this report. And again, the intent is, based on the discussion today, to have the policies and the procedure bylaw amendment to go together with this report when it goes to council. I believe it's scheduled for this Thursday.
Thank you very much, Ms. Almas, and a lot of work from your department has gone into this, plus some legal support as well, so that certainly is recognized. So I'm going to have the staff report on the floor and open it up to questions. That Strategic Initiative Standing Committee receive and refer staff report C 2018-14 to the next meeting of council. That council hear and direct the clerk to proceed with the recommended actions and prepare the necessary procedures and amending bylaws to implement the accountability and transparency measures recommended herein. And further, that council refer consideration of the enhanced accountability tools and identified gaps to the 2019 budget deliberations. Mover and seconder. Councillor Fryer, Deputy. Questions? Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Cooper. And thank you, Sarah and staff, for this. It's been a long process, and this is report number 2, and it goes back many years, and will be an ongoing endeavor into the future, I'm sure. I just wanted a clarification on the recorded votes mechanism. I think if I understand the report and what you've told us is that on the iCompass platform, there's a way for us to register our votes on every vote issue other than just an administrative one. And so that somebody can go on to the platform and see how every council member has voted on a particular issue, and I guess also check out attendance as well.
Right, that's correct.
But you're suggesting that for minuting purposes, if somebody wants a recorded vote, you ask, as we do in due course now.
Correct, yes.
Okay. But there will be, I guess what I'm most interested in is an ongoing record of how individual council members voted on issues.
That's correct. After every meeting, there'll be a public record of how they voted. And again, if there is any discrepancy, it's the official minutes that will prevail.
Okay. And so just to get clarification, when it says within the iCompass agenda management system or solution, significant business can be identified as a vote that is recorded. How would we identify significant?
Ms. Almas.
Certainly through your worship to Deputy Mayor Saunderson. In conversations with iCompass, what they would do is we would work together with them to establish this, because it's not in place right now, is that once the agenda distribution goes out, you will actually see every item that you'll have to be requested to identify your vote. So the adoption of the agenda, receiving consent material, adjournments, recess, motions, those items most likely will not be targeted for you to do a vote on. We're looking at consent items, would likely, even actually receiving consent items, we're going to request a recorded vote on, or I keep getting tongue-tied within, it's not a recorded vote, but it's a vote that's being identified. So, and then, so basically any procedural item would not require you to acknowledge whether you're in favor or opposition. But again, if that's something that council wants and it wasn't identified in the agenda, you could always request it.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor?
And just one follow-up question on the enhanced community outreach. As I understand it, right now with the governance work that's going on and the work on the IT, we're looking at platforms that can either are offered by iCompass or can partner with iCompass that would look at community enhancement already.
Ms. Ellis?
Certainly through your worship to Deputy Mayor Saunderson, there's actually a number of software packages that our communications officer for one has been exploring, not necessarily through iCompass. They're external software providers for different services, whether they're survey type services or something just to engage the public to get more public conversation within council's consideration before policies are developed.
And that was where I was going at. I was looking for the interactive engagement to get the dialogue going. And then as I understand the add-on then to the enhancement under this report is the phone app that would allow citizens to access our website through the handhelds or tablets or whatever. Is that correct?
That's correct. So basically the app is kind of a standalone, it's a mobile app that would be available for all smartphone users or tablet users. However, it is an independent app and certain things would be linked to our own website. However, it could be linked to a county website or it could have its own information stored within the app itself. So it's not completely tied to the website, but there's an integration.
And the thought being that you can get out in a timely way notices about road conditions or garbage pickup or other municipal services.
Absolutely.
Good, thank you. And then finally on the lobbyist register, then staff is going to come back through the governance report looking at ways that we might implement that on a cost-effective basis within Collingwood.
That's correct. And if there is an opportunity to do it within in-house resources, then that's something that we would obviously take a look at first. And if there's going to be additional costs, obviously that's why we're tying it together with the budget process.
Good. Those are my questions, and thank you again for that report.
Councillor Fryer?
Thank you, Mayor Cooper. And following up on the questions about the recorded vote concept, as that moves forward, that won't have any impact on the ability down the road to possibly institute the future off-site participation by a council member. And obviously we're not doing that yet, but I'm just wondering if it would, it'll be kept in mind so that it doesn't preclude the possibility of an off-site participation.
Ms. Ellis?
Certainly through your worship to Councillor Fryer, with respect to electronic participation, again, that's a discretionary item if we look at for council purposes, but regardless, if a member of council, that's one item where if we utilize it through a tablet process, so if the new council is issued with tablets, then regardless whether you're at the meeting or you're abroad somewhere, you can still access your tablet and make a recorded vote, or a vote that will be identified.
Go ahead.
So it's going to be considered as part of the process, because I did start to think about the security issues of that. So that's something that would be under consideration. Just the other thing I was going to say is that I think a really important element of the accountability and transparency steps is making sure that, I mentioned this before, I think our SIC meetings specifically should be on a more firm schedule. So it's known to the public when they're coming up and not just a few days before or that. And I think that that allows for adequate time to be prepared and most importantly public input, so that the dual role that the SIC plays, which is basically Finance Committee too, I just think it's really important that there's a more firm schedule to these meetings so that councillors are aware of it. As a councillor, I want to know when they are, so, and I'm sure the public do too, so, thank you.
I have a couple of questions or comments maybe to you, Sarah, or Communications Officer. Enhanced community outreach, looking at this app, mobile app. Annual fee of less than $5,000, is that per license per person, or that's as a whole?
As a whole.
Okay, thank you, that gives me better comfort knowing that. And the other is that not,
Perhaps should we integrate too, that the app would be free to download as well to the public.
okay, good to know. Also, looking at that specific mobile app, would that be similar to what is offered now to the public in a Google Alert? Or is it something a little bit?
It would be similar to a Google Alert, yes.
Janet?
To your worship, the app alerts would let us kind of determine what sort of notifications we wanted to push out. So if there were an emergency situation or a fire ban or a waste collection impact, we could send out those notifications. Whereas Google Alerts are more news-based. You can kind of sign up for what kind of things you want. The mobile app would allow us to determine what notifications we pushed out to our users.
Okay, thank you. And the other is, and I know Ms. Almas, you and I have had many discussions on in-camera matters, and understanding that certainly there is that list of what qualifies for in-camera, and looking at having few of those in-camera meetings. So I hope that as this shakes out, so to speak, that certainly fewer in-camera meetings can roll out from that. But
Certainly, through your worship, I'll just add that this council has dealt with a number of phenomenal issues over their term, which has warranted special in-camera discussions, but they are all regularly vetted and discussed. But hopefully in the future, yes, we can start streamlining discussions and delegations and
open and transparency.
absolutely.
And just lastly, perhaps more question to Ms. Leonard. Looking at the BMA reports and the financial health of the community completed annually and available to the public, which is fine, as other municipalities have done. Is that something that from time to time, maybe alternate years, that staff can in-house do that rather than having consultants every year focus on this?
Through your worship, it's something we could look at doing. It adds more to the transparency and accountability if it's an independent third party.
Okay. Okay, I was just thinking of cost savings. Okay,
If I
Ms.
may,
Almas?
certainly through your worship, just additionally add through what our communications officer has indicated about the Google Alert, what I was referring to as a push notification as well, is you could also sign up for areas in which you are interested in receiving those notifications back to you, similar to a Google Alert.
And that's what I wondered about that. Okay, thank you. Okay, then on that note, then I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. Next we have C 2018-15, communications during Collingwood judicial inquiry. That Strategic Initiatives Committee receive and refer staff report C 2018-15 to the next meeting of council, and that council adhere to section 4.5 of the Corporate Communications Protocol when questions regarding the judicial inquiry are received, and that any questions related to the inquiry or other high-profile matters be referred to and addressed by the CAO. Mover and seconder. Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Doherty. And so, Janet, or who takes the lead on this one?
Certainly, through your worship to the committee. So this is a matter that came up through the last council meeting, a request to have this investigated. So I'll let our communications officer, Jeanette May, speak to this as she has drafted this report for the committee's consideration.
Janet?
Through your worship, so the motion at the last meeting, council requested a report on options related to communications during the judicial inquiry. So the options are rather limited, but we've kind of presented to either that we follow the corporate communications protocol, which states that for high profile matters, which I think is certainly can be considered, would be referred to the CAO, to handle any questions related to the inquiry, or we can refer any questions received straight to the inquiry staff themselves. Their website is now active, and they have a communications staff member appointed, Peter Rayhawk. He has experience in working on a number of inquiries, and he is listed as communications contact for media and public on their website as well. So those are the two options we've presented in the report for your consideration.
Questions, council? Sorry, yeah. Councillor Lloyd.
No, I
Councillor,
completely agree with the recommendation, thank you.
all right then, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? That is carried. And for those that are absent today, to ensure that they receive that same information. We have no public delegations. Is there anyone from the public? No, okay. Other business? Okay. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Fryer, all those in favor? That is good thing. That is carried, thank you. And we'll come back at 5 o'clock for committee, standing committee.